Well, it looks like we filled in a little bit after the 10 o'clock hour, so I'm glad that you're all here. And again, I appreciate the fact that you're here. It is a choice you make to give time to opportunities like this, to find community with each other. I'm getting a lot of ringing. I don't know if that's, since it's at me, I'll just keep talking and we'll figure it out. So. It has been a real joy this year to have had, this is my fourth opportunity to bring a message in your congregation, and I've been following along some of the other messages that were presented, so it does increase my connection in my heart to you, and it has been lovely to have friendly faces greet me and welcome me back, pretend to like my messages, things like that. So. Today's message is the second part of a message that was preached last week. Now, trust me, if you weren't here, you haven't missed something that you can't catch up on. I'm going to refer to it again, both for those of you that were here to have a reminder of what we were engaged in, but then also to kind of carry on, because it is a natural progression out of the message. And we're still in Psalm 139. And last time I was here, I had a very long introduction before we began to read the message. This morning I'm going to go at it the completely opposite way. We're actually going to start with verse 10, which is where we left off. I actually think it's 11, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so we stopped at verse 10, so today we're starting at verse 11. And I will read it for you and just invite you to enter into it. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light will become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame wasn't hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Now, if you were here last week, I hope that perhaps you had some chance in the 7 days that have passed to have some times of hygge with God. We talked about that last week. For those of you that weren't there, it was kind of an unusual approach for the last Sunday of Advent. But we talked about the coziness that comes from a fireplace or from a Christmas tree in a darkened room and things like that, and the way that our hearts are just warmed by that. And I just invited all of those that were here to kind of look for opportunities to experience that with the Spirit, to just be present to God in the quiet of those places and spaces and to find a deeper connection to Him. Now, that followed a message where we were learning some things about God, because the first 10 verses of Psalm 139. I'm basically going to give you a summary so that you can sort of either be reminded or be caught up in terms of some of the things we discovered last week when we read the first 10 verses of Psalm 139. We learned that God knows our thoughts. We learned that He's aware of everything we do. We learned that He knows our words before we speak them, that He hems us in with protection and affection, and He's with us everywhere we go. So those are really important awarenesses that have come out of this thing. And I want to sort of reawaken us this morning to why that matters. It's a sense of that we now know these are true about God, but it's like, so what do we do in response to that? So the verses that we've just read fall into the same category. And as the more we learn about God through Psalm 139, the more we sort of are facing ourselves with two possible responses to it. Some of us might find words like the ones you see up here, all the days ordained for me were written in your book before a single one came to be. They might be terrifying, or they might be upsetting, or they might be confusing, right? And for others, it would be like, oh, what a comfort that these words are. I'm going to actually ask you to go to the slide that has verse 11 on it. See if we can find it here. Yeah, verse 11 and 12. These are interesting words where it says, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me. It's kind of like, it's almost like David saying, you know, if I could go in a dark place, God couldn't see me. Or, you know, like his sin with Bathsheba was done at night, in the dwelling place of the king. So clearly, you know, God can't get to me there, kind of thing. But every time I see this particular passage, I love it, how he says, surely the darkness will hide me. I wonder if any of you can go back 27 years and remember a movie called The Truman Show. Any of you, can any of you recall The Truman Show? All right, so I'll bring you up to speed. Truman is this child born on a TV set, and he lives his entire life in this fake world, and he is watched on TV every night by millions of people across America because they watched this child born and raised and become a man, right? Well, at some point in time, Truman becomes aware through circumstances that his life is actually not real, that the boundaries of his world are actually artificial. So he decides he's going to escape from this artificial world. So he waits for the cover of darkness, and he sneaks away, and the producers of the show go, Truman, he's gone. Like, where is he? We can't find him in the dark. And the director says, okay, cue the sun, and turns on the sun, and bam, now everyone can see where he is, right? And I kind of feel that same way about this passage, that sometimes we feel like, I can get away. If I do it in the dark, then it's not visible, right? And David is just so profoundly true here. He says, you know, if I think the darkness will hide me, well, the darkness is just the same as light to you. And I think that we need to come to terms with that and say, you know, if we start to make human limitations on God, we kind of make God in our own image. We imagine he's like us when he's not. So another passage that is even more upsetting for some people, and if you can go to the one about, one more. Here we go, yes. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before a single one came to be. I mentioned this before. You might have different feelings about this, and actually, one of the primary things you might feel is confusion. So what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to try to make sense of this in the way that you can go home going, I get it a little. One of the things I promise you is that I will not take on a passage like this that has had, you know, millions of lines of commentary on it and say, I have the right answer for this question. Like, I'm going to invite you to see it in a new way, but I won't do it in a way that I says, this is the authoritative way. But I trust that as I have pressed into this passage, I have made it my own, and I've sought the counsel of the internet, the reading other philosophies and things like that, because it's a very interesting thing. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before a single one came to be. Again, we're sort of anthropomorphizing God as if he needs to have a book to keep track of things that we have. He says, well, your book, let's open a book to page 1,000,000, and on that day you're going to do that. Really what it means is that all the days ordained for me are in your awareness before a single one came to be. In other words, the earlier passage says, your eyes saw my unformed body. Essentially, it says, Jesus, you saw me when I was an embryo. You saw me as an embryo and could see all the days that were set for me. And for some of you that might say, so are we talking like predetermination, that he determined what those days were? And I want to give you a picture of it that helps you understand that it is not predetermination or predestination, but it's instead a simple word called foreknowledge. So a knowledge, the technical term is prescient. So God knows our future before we live it. And I'm going to just give you a little synopsis. I love teaching like I'm still at summer camp, so because people say I can understand when you give me summer camp type analogies. So imagine with me, before time exists, which you can't imagine because we're bound by time, right? We only really know time. It doesn't feel like time ever didn't exist. But it didn't. Because what is time? What is time? Anyone just, I'm actually going to ask you to holler it out. What is it? It has to do with the turning of the sun around the earth. It has to do with the earth moving on its axis. It has to do with all the things. So in order for there to be time, there has to be earth and there has to be sun to make days, which make months, which make years. So before the earth began, before God created it, he existed over here. God, in the Trinity form, existed with apparently angels and even Lucifer before the foundations of the earth were laid. So here's this long period of time, actually this long period of non-time, that God exists, and then he says, let there be light, and there was light, and there will be the earth, and let's separate the things, and we got it moving, and there was the first day. The first day is the first time that time ever existed. Kind of weird, hey? Because we've always lived in time, so we can't imagine a life that was apart from it. So what did God do for all those years? There weren't years. He existed. And when the world is rolled up like a scroll, and then there's eternity that follows, timelessness again. So there's only time in our existence right now. So when I say like this, all the days ordained for me, where you were aware of God before a single one came to be, what you need to know is that God, who existed before time, exists in time and will exist after time, isn't bound by time. He can see the beginning of your life, the middle of your life, the end of your life, and 1,000 years later. He's able to see what you can only see in time, he sees outside of time. I don't want to belabor the point a lot, but maybe this analogy might land for you. Now, I'm looking out at the audience, and I don't probably see a lot of NFL fans. But if you are, you'll know that there's a game on just after church today. And so I've PVR'd that game. And I'm going to come home from church this morning. I'm going to have lunch with my family. Nancy's daughter and son-in-law are here from Ontario. So we'll visit, we'll go for a walk or whatever. And then maybe about 6 or 7 tonight, I'll watch this game. There's a point to what I'm saying. When I turn it on, I can go to the end of the game, I can go to halftime, or I can go to the beginning. I'm not bound by the fact that that game is being played at 11 a.m. And so I can see what I want from wherever I want within that. I have that power. But who wins the game? It's the players. It's their efforts, their skills, their mistakes, their errors. Everything within that existence is determining the outcome of the game. And I want to let you know that when God foreknows your future, you are still responsible for everything that you do, and you are still accountable, and you have within you the awareness of how to bring about a life that honors God. It's not predetermined. It's interesting because you know that there's something called the Lamb's Book of Life, and it's written before the foundations of the earth were laid. It's so weird. The Lamb's Book of Life holds the names of all the people that are going to be saved by the Lamb of God. And it was written before the foundation of the earth was laid, which makes you think it's predeterminism, but it's foreknowledge. Every one of you, when you act today, tomorrow, and the next day, are acting out of free will. That's not taken from you. God's foreknowledge knows what you'll do, but you are responsible for what you do. You can't just kind of rest in the fact that your name's in the book or wonder fatalistically, I'm not in the book, probably. It's like you are the person responsible for living your life. So I just wanted to kind of give you that little side explanation of this chapter because I think it's important to recognize what's actually true and what's not true. Because when we come to understand God in this way, hopefully the more we learn about his daily participation in our life and his daily connection and his awareness of everything we do, my hope is that we'll respond to that positively and not cower or come away with fear. I have good news and bad news for you. A lot of it depends on whether or not you are in a place where you feel like God is trustworthy. But every word of Psalm 139 is true, where it says, you searched me, you know me, when I rise, you know every word on my lips. Everything that's said in there is true. But it'll either be the most amazing, comforting truth for you, or it might be the most upsetting, because it's just like, I don't know quite what to do with this information. Now, what David does with this information is really, it sort of sets a pattern for us. I don't know if anyone ever noticed when you've read it for yourself, or even when I was sharing from it yesterday. Verse 1 starts, and this is important. If you lost me for a second, come on back. Lord, you have searched me and know me. That's what it says in verse 1. And what does it say in verse 23? Search me, O God, and know my heart. So David is saying, I've learned this about you, and this is my only response. Have more of me. I want to open myself up to you. I want to be known by you even more, even though I know probably I can't be. But it's me saying, I know you search me, so search me. And it's the same thing when I mentioned in a previous message about my time of coming away with God, where I was held and cared for and loved. All I wanted to do was to say, okay, God, now I'm ready. Show me if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in your way. It was my natural response to this passage, just like it's David's response to the passage. Now, just like David, I have situations in my life where I'd had enough opportunity for God to show me his faithfulness. And just like David, I had a lot of tragedies in my life as well. I'm going to tell you a brief story just to give you context. In November of 2008, my first wife, Jackie, was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. She was terminal from the day of her diagnosis, and she lived 9 months. So in that season of 9 months, you can imagine that, you're questioning God's care, his control, all these sorts of things. It's pretty natural to wonder whether this God who's promised to be good is actually good. What I wanted to tell you is that in that season, I had never had an opportunity to experience God more present in my life than I did in those 9 months. I would have friends that would say, Frank, how are you still standing? I'd say, well, it's kind of hard to stand when you can't fall. I was holding my 4 daughters who were grieving the loss of their mom, and God's arms were holding me. I couldn't fall. It wasn't just that I was heroic. I was simply unable to fall because I had him so closely tied around me. And out of that situation where I experienced his love, when she passed, I made a decision then that I've never regretted, and I'm actually going to invite you to consider making the same sort of a decision. The more you know God, the more you feel ready to say this. And what I chose to do was I said, God, I'm going to live my life with open palms. Now, I know there's lots and lots of language around this floating around in the church, but this is what I imagine. Here, God, here is my career, my finances, my children, my relationships, hoping for a new companion in my life. Like, whatever it is, God, I want to just, there was a song by Robin Mark called Jesus, All for Jesus. It goes, all of my ambitions, hopes, and plans, I surrender these into your hand, because it's only in your will that I'm free. Isn't that interesting? Surrender leads to freedom. So I did. I offered God my career, finances, relationships, children, and future partner. And then I want to tell you what happened. Now, I'm intentionally telling you a story that's nuanced, because nobody needs to have some fake Christian story. The very first thing that happened, the very first summer, I was working at Camp Chestermere. It's July 7th. So I'm only 11 months after the passing of my first wife. And I get a phone call from one of my daughters who's in the hospital after a suicide attempt. The same day, another daughter calls me from the psych ward where she has taken herself because she's concerned that she's going to harm herself to the point of death. And I look at God and I say, my life is shit. I just wanted to let him know how disappointed I was about the circumstances of my life. Like, how in the world is this happening to a good, godly servant running a Christian camp? But I didn't go anywhere because my hands were held open to him. If I'm going to do that, you kind of got to do it. And I have to tell you that 16 years later, both of those daughters are healthy and well in ways they've never been. But that's the end of the story. But I'm saying that a life held open to God is going to have those moments where you just simply don't want them. I had a new relationship opened to God. In that new relationship, 15 months after the death of my wife, I felt feelings I hadn't felt in 30 years. Young love, excitement, delight. It's like you took my breath away. Most of you haven't had that recent experience. For me, I had it again. And it was like, Lord, I want to marry this woman. But I surrender her to your hands. I surrender her with open palms. She and I broke up on a Saturday night. Not my decision, it was hers. She broke up with me on a Saturday night. Sunday morning, Nancy was emailing me from Ontario because she had seen me speak on a stage in Florida at a Christian camping conference we went to. And I told about the death of my wife of 27 years, and she wrote me to say, I lost my husband of 27 years this summer. And that began a courtship that led to marriage, that led to me moving to Ontario to take a role in her camp there. But spoiler alert, things didn't all work out like you hoped for. And 4 years later, the bishop of the denomination that led the camp asked me for my resignation. And I had to leave this ministry that I'd moved to Ontario to lead. And I was unemployed for 14 months. Now, in the same season, my oldest daughter was in a situation where she was diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer at 30 years of age. And you're kind of going, Frank, this does not exactly sound like the compelling story that I want to follow, right? But what happens in that season of my unemployment is God is surrounding me with his love in ways he couldn't have done if I'd kept working for him. Because every day I just said, wake up every morning and, okay, God, what difference are we going to make in the world today? And all of a sudden I had something to do for God. And he taught me in that unemployment season what he had to show me about his love and his new way for me. He did heal my daughter 11 years later. She was over last night laughing, full of joy, 11 years cancer-free, when her diagnosis said you have a 1 to 3% chance of living beyond 5 years. It was a death sentence for her, and she's alive. And again, my wife did die. My daughter did not. There's no certainty. It's not if you give yourself over to God's control that you're going to get this perfect life. I'm actually warning you, you won't. But the thing is, the life is going to happen to you anyways. So that day that I yelled into the night, God, my life is shit. I'm sorry about the bad word, but it needs to be said. I turned around and I went back into my office and I says, but where else can I go? Who else has the words of life? How am I going to live apart from you, decimated by this sadness, right? So there's a sense of knowing that God comes in. I love the fact that all the days ordained for me were written in his book before a single one came to be, so that before the foundations of the earth were laid, he knew how to come and comfort me in that moment. So after 16 months of unemployment, I found this job that suited me more than any I've ever had, and I was the director at Kingsfold Retreat Center for 9 years. And then a coworker sabotaged my career. I'd intended to retire, and my date was moved up by the will of the board of directors. But guess what? I'm now having the very best months of my whole life where I am free from paid work, and I get to do stuff like this. Like, you don't know that I spent 20 hours over the past week praying and being with God and writing versions of this, because nothing matters more to me than having a chance to be involved in somebody's reawakening, in their re-intention, in their action towards this fullness of life. I don't think I could have done as well if I was still working full-time and popping in to preach for you guys. So this has been a gift for me, plus just a gift. I've got 5 children in the city. I can come and help them hang up Christmas lights or bring them their groceries when they're sick with COVID. These are all things that happen. But there's this beauty. It's like something was taken from me and God was there with me. It's just this beautiful back and forth that I just want to say that there is no life with Christ that's better, that's worse than a life without him. Like, your life is the same. It's funny. It's kind of like, I love this saying I first heard this year. It's like, if you have no joy in the snow, you will have less joy, but the same amount of snow. And that's exactly is the point I'm making. Your beliefs or your things, your response to your life isn't actually going to change your life. If you walk away from here and says, I'm not going to open my life up to a God who knows everything about me, it's like, I'm sorry, God knows everything about you, and he will know everything about you. You can choose to do it with him or to do it without him, but he's still going to be there. There is no life apart from him having a situation, because in the last 2 weeks we learned these things, that he knows our thoughts, that he's aware of everything we do, that he knows our words before we speak them, that he hems us in with protection and affection, that he's with us everywhere we go, that he's not limited by darkness, that he created us and knew us in the embryo stage, and that he knows our future. So how will you respond to this new awareness? It's funny, this is last Sunday before New Year's, and in New Year's there tends to be New Year's resolutions. And all I want to say is, those are great. Like, get out there and do them. Like, make decisions about your eating habits or your relationships or your exercise. Like, do things to become better inside and out, right? But I also want, in this New Year season, to invite you to have a New Year reawakening. A reawakening to a knowledge of God's immediate presence in your life. It's a presence that's there every year, every month, every week, every day, every hour. And I think sometimes we have fallen asleep to that truth. And I want you to reawaken to that truth. As you enter a new year, imagine a year that minute by minute God walks with you. What difference would that make? And would you like to actually this morning or sometime in the near future make the same kind of promise I made to God to say, I'm going to live my life with open palms. I'm going to trust you with the timing of my career and my retirement, of my partner or my not, my children's health or the lack of it. Can I trust you with that? And I can just only testify that a life lived with open palms, a life lived with awakenings to God's presence, is a life that I would love for you all to experience. Now, I'm going to ask the tech team to put a slide of Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24 up on the screen. This is how David ends the passage. And as I conclude my message, I'm actually going to read them aloud. That's not a surprise. But I'm going to invite you to make these words your own. Last week, Sunday, we began with the words together, God, you have searched me. And today we're going to conclude with these words. Let's read them together. Search us, God, and know our hearts. Test us and know our anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in us, and lead us in the way everlasting. I love that. Lead us in the way everlasting. It's like, if you know the circumstances of my life that are coming, would you lead me in the way that's best for me? Let me pray for you. Father, it is both disconcerting and deeply rewarding to know the level of your love for us, the level and the depth and the intimacy of your relationship with each of us. So as we have this beautiful psalm that you've inspired, that David could just sing his praises of all the ways that you connect with his life. We know his life was not pure in every part. It wasn't untroubled. He had adultery. He had children who rose up against him. That he offered his life to you this way. We also want to do the same. We trust you in it. We trust you to care for us. We trust you to be the author of our very best moments and our deep companion in those saddest moments. Would you just be a comforting presence? Would you hem us in with your affection and with your protection these days? Amen.